You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
The midterms are happening now. And MAGA propaganda is losing. Analysis, based on an article by Nick Heldon. MAGA attention economy is wobbling. The power structure isn't. The source of the story. The reporting here is simple. A set of right-wing influencers who once helped carry Trump are a losing audience, fighting each other and in some cases gaining traction only after turning on Trump. The Times treats this as a messaging problem for Republicans heading into the midterms. That is too timid. The real story is not that MAGA media is falling apart. It is that a propaganda ecosystem built on outrage, platform dependency, and political grievance is running into the limits of its own business model. Power sits elsewhere. The people who actually hold institutional power are not Benny Johnson, Dan Bongino, Candace Owens, or the rest of the influencer class. They are not lawmakers, and they are not the state. Donald Trump and the Republican Party control the machinery of government in the article's frame, which is exactly why the outrage market is thinner. It is harder to fake rebellion when your side is already in charge. That matters. A movement that built its identity on victimhood has to keep manufacturing enemies to stay monetized. When Republicans control Washington, the act gets harder. The grift does not disappear. It just loses some of its oxygen. Propaganda needs conflict. The article correctly notes that political outrage is harder to stoke under Republican control. That is not a cultural accident. It is the operating principle of the whole ecosystem. These influencers were never independent analysts. They were distribution channels for partisan resentment, packaged as personality. Their value came from converting attention into loyalty, loyalty into clicks, and clicks into political cover for a party that needed a permanent grievance machine. When the mood shifts, the audience does not necessarily become principled. It just gets bored, and boredom is deadly to an outrage economy. The platform is the patron. The peace gestures at algorithms on X and the rise of newer creators mixing politics with gaming, relationships, and other content. That is not a side note. It is the structure. These figures are not merely losing relevance because their politics are stale. They are subject to platform rules, recommendation systems, and audience migration. Their reach is rented, not owned. The entire right-wing attention economy depends on private platforms whose incentives are unstable and whose algorithms can reshuffle influence without warning. That makes the movement loud, volatile, and strategically shallow. This is why the collapse of one influencer lane does not produce democratic clarity. It produces a scramble for a new lane. The opportunists are adapting. The article's most revealing detail is that some disaffected Trump supporters are growing by criticizing Trump. That is not ideological maturation. It is market repositioning. Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens are not becoming better actors in a democratic sense because they are taking shots at Trump. They are showing that the right-wing audience can be resegmented and monetized even through dissent. The brand changes. The underlying politics do not have to. A white nationalist influencer in a culture war grifter can rebrand opposition to Trump as a fresh product line. That is not a correction. It is adaptive extremism. The larger pattern. The political lesson is not that MAGA has weakened in any meaningful democratic sense. It is that authoritarian politics cannot survive on one man's charisma alone. It needs a layered system of media operatives, grievance merchants, platform amplification, and institutional power. When that system stumbles, the problem is not just electoral messaging. It is the brittleness of a movement that confuses attention with legitimacy. The deeper failure belongs to the institutions that allowed this ecosystem to metastasize in the first place. Republican power supplied the content. Platform capitalism supplied the distribution. Influencers supplied the fraud. Now the audience is fragmenting and the machine is hunting for new forms. That is the pattern. It is not collapse. It is mutation. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article. With the automated voice of Kuzil, thanks for listening.